Hey, everyone. Great to see so many faces. My name is Pia. I work for Spotify as a tribe lead for the Platform Developer Experience tribe. I've been working there for 3 years, and the reason for giving this talk is that I would like to share the journey that we are on, still on, in the hope that maybe this can help you in your teams to keep them productive. So the name of my talk is Own Your Speed, and I will share the top 2 productivity challenges that we were seeing 1 year ago at Spotify in our R&D organization, and of course what we're trying to do about it. So let's start from the beginning. What did we see 1 year ago? Well, lots of people. So we were in hypergrowth, as we usually are at Spotify. And we were, from the platform perspective where I work, and Matthias here, we were measuring productivity in our developer organization. So we were seeing some trends in our metrics that pointed the wrong way. For example, one metric that we have is how fast an engineer can onboard to Spotify and feel and become productive. So we were seeing that metric was increasing in number of days. We didn't really know why, but of course we realized that hiring more people is making us slower. And this might be of use for everyone. I think this is a global problem. So what we did about it was, let's start by asking our engineers. So we did a pretty huge survey, asking our engineers what they think was blocking their productivity. And our engineers said, in priority order, 2 things. First, there are too many distractions. What the engineers mean with distractions is lots of things, but you can probably imagine it's like context switching. But we're boiling it down for the simplicity of having a talk about it like this to meetings. So picture an engineer, for example, as the quote said, "I'm sitting in too many meetings with too many people making too few decisions." Also, it seemed to be not really clear the decision path. That was also something brought up in this productivity survey. So that's the number 1 challenge our engineers raised for them becoming more productive. Number 2, they can't find the right things. They struggle to find the right APIs they need to integrate to, the right versions of those APIs, the right documentation, trust that documentation. Who is the owner of this tool? You can imagine in a hypergrowth company doubling its size for many years. We have been around for like 11 years now. And for the 7 first years, we were doubling in size. So keeping track of who wrote that tool when squads are constantly spinning up, that's a challenge. So ownership is a huge problem. So let's look at the first one. How did we get distracted? Well, listening to our engineers, we found a few things. We're now in the search for where are all these meetings coming from? So look at this team. This is a typical Spotify team. We have a bunch of various specialists because we hire cross-functional teams, of course. Backend engineer is red, yellow maybe, UX designer, data engineer, etc. We want to hire a cross-functional team in order for the team to own their domain and be able to be autonomous and empowered to reach their own vision. However, we need to think about a few things that we have been hearing from our engineers that causes a lot of meetings. So one thing, for example, is that demand varies. In the beginning of the quarter, the web engineer in the team might be perfectly able to work on the top prioritized thing. However, the data engineer in the team is not, because maybe the data thingy needs to wait for the backend service in order to get some context. So what do our wonderful engineers do? Well, they go and help others. So the web engineer might ask a few others in another team, causing a lot of meetings and syncs, and the data engineer is helping some other team. So that's a reason for a few meetings, of course. Another thing is that hiring takes time. So it's very rare that we actually have all the skills in a team that we are in need of right now. In the beginning of the year, we might not know, we will not know what we will need 9 months from now, because 9 months is pretty much when you need to start recruiting for that person. So that's another thing. Also leads to meeting, of course, because we have a dependency graph between all the squads needing various competencies. And the third thing is that we have a lot of communication. We see that people need to communicate through a translation layer like this, as you see in the middle. The person in the middle needs to translate through the various specialists' needs, so the UX designer can talk to the backend engineer who can talk to the web engineer. That leads to a few misunderstandings. Having a technical conversation with an iOS engineer, if you have never ever shipped any iOS code and you're a web engineer, might lead to a few follow-ups because of some misunderstandings. So our bet here is to focus on growing our people, basically, instead of the number of people. So that's called T-shapedness in the industry, and I'm sure many of you have heard it before. It's been around for a very long time. It simply means that you, as a Spotify engineer, you would deepen your depth knowledge. Maybe you love your web stack. That's why you became an engineer and you still love it. So we want you to deepen that skill. However, we also would like you to broaden your skill sets and pick up a few other disciplines to some level that can enable you and empower your team to get unstuck. So let's take a look at what that looks like for our teams. So the T-shaped team, as you can see, are a few less people. That's intentionally because we believe that that actually will be the case when people have like the one box is their what we call major. Maybe that's what you enter the company with. You're a back-end engineer, that's your major. And then you pick up a few minors. So maybe you learn some web, you learn some iOS. And that leads to a team that is more fluent and more enabled to act quicker. Also, as you can see, the arrows here are different. The communication style in the team changes. That's our bet. And of course, we're going to do user research to see if that actually is the case as well. So the communication style, we hope we will get rid of this translation layer in between the engineers from various disciplines and other disciplines as well, like UX designers. Oh, another thing. So it's also important to remember that we are not like asking engineers to come into the company as a back-end engineer and then please go ahead and become an iOS engineer, because right now we need that. So that's not at all what Spotify is trying to do. That's not what we believe in. We are hiring very passionate people. They want to deepen their skills. However, one can pick up other skills so that you can broaden yourself. So we try to really make this voluntary and all about empowering yourself. This is also why I decided to have this talk myself. Before I went into leadership, where I'm at right now, I was an engineer for 15 years. And one of the things that I felt is that I never really got the chance to do this. So I was like always asked to do the back-end thing because I was a back-end engineer and pretty senior, as one becomes after 15 years. But that was sad. I think I could have become such broader engineer, such a better person also to learn about the other skills if I just would have had the chance. Someone would have offered me that opportunity. Okay, so then we of course need to know, how do we go about and do this in our organizations, and how might you want to do this in your organization? So again, we asked our engineers, how do you think we could do this at Spotify? And in that survey, they answered these things in priority order. First and foremost, your company need to really say that, yes, this is something we believe in. Without the company support, engineers are not sure if they can actually go ahead and spend that time building that first miner. And then pairing and mobbing, excellent ways, according to our engineers, to grow a miner quickly. And then we have something called Embed that I wanted you to know about as well. Embed is something very, very common at Spotify. We usually in all the squads, we have a couple of engineers from other teams embedding in our team, working with us for a few sprints. And at the same time, some people in my squad is working in some other teams, embedding there. Usually this takes place when you integrate with some other team and you need to collaborate. So instead of like finishing your thing and then trying to integrate, we basically always have people go over, sit with that other team for 1-2 sprints, embedding, learning to know these people, learning the domain, and getting the integration smooth. And of course, formal trainings. We have like something that you can also do in your companies. Like we have Spotify University, so we have like machine learning university, mobile university, backend university, etc. So that's also, of course, part in growing your first miner. So here we are. Let's say she's an engineer at Spotify. She gets it. She wants to get her team unstuck by growing her first miner. So now we come to the second productivity challenge, which is she can't find the right tools. So she's a web engineer, say. She wants to learn some backend because she anyway needs to integrate with this API. But which version, which documentation, who owns this service? Very difficult for her to find the right things. Takes a lot of time. And maybe she has to set up a meeting for that. So why is it so hard to find things at Spotify? Well, and I think potentially in other companies as well. So that's because Spotify is organized like this. This is a picture of the platform tribe organization, but this is common across all tribes. So we have these data backend mobile tribes. They are optimized for autonomy and speed within themselves. So it's very fast to iterate on tooling for the mobile engineers in the mobile tribe. And they are super good at doing that. However, now we're asking our engineers to cross-skill, cross-discipline, and we're not at all optimized for that. So when the web engineer tries to learn backend, those tools, CI/CD, documentation, testing, etc., everything looks different, works differently. Takes a lot of time. So what we believe in, that we need to somehow platformize and centralize some stuff to help our engineers cross-skilling. And this sounds so easy, right? Let's just put everything under a hood and have all engineers on the top here who are building all these kind of tools that are real Spotify users are using, like all the different apps, for example, interact with the infrastructure platform where all the tooling for the Spotify ecosystem exists. However, the challenge for building a platform and why Spotify has resisted it for so long is that it's not in alignment with our values. Because we believe in autonomy and empowered teams and empowered tribes. So how is that possible when we need a consistency between tribes? Well, it is a journey, and it's not easy, but there are a few tricks and tips that I would like to share with you if you would like to do the same for your customers. Maybe you would like to make your R&D department more productive while hiring lots of people. And what we have found is if you find yourself in the same position that we were, that you need to find a consistent layer so that your engineers can interact much more smooth with all the platform infrastructure, then you need to build that platform as a thin plug-in layer. That's what we discovered. So what does that mean? That means that the platform team at Spotify is actually 7 people. It's in my tribe, 7 people squad. And what they have built is simply a very thin layer of a plugin framework. So they own, and all the 2,000 plus engineers are interacting with this plugin layer. So the platform squad actually owns the problem of what does platform look like? How do we express ourselves when we are presenting a tool? However, all the tools that people find in this platform plugin layer are built by the actual tribes in the disciplines. So data, mobile, backend, security, etc., etc. All build the tools because they are the experts in knowing what the hell a data engineer actually needs, because they know. So this is the sort of the trick that we have found super useful for us. So they can still be autonomous and empowered and do their thing. But then they build a little plugin in JavaScript, in React, and add it to the platform, which is basically only the marketplace for the plugin, for the tools. Today we have like 75-ish tools in our platform that our engineers need to wade through in order to ship code to production. And this makes it easier. So the 7-people squad owning the platform actually haven't written much of the code in the platform at all. So the trick is to create this inner source culture. When you build the platform, you build it pluggable and extendable, and have everyone else, both actually the customer, i.e. the engineers in your organization, they build tools themselves as well, that they want other customers usually to use. And the engineers here from the platform tribes also build tools. Everyone market their tool the same way. Plus also another tip for building something consistent is to what we call take the pain. So we try to make platform help our customers so that they voluntarily, and when I say our customers, in our case, that's the engineers of Spotify. So we want the engineers to themselves want to use the platform because it benefits them. So basically, that's like, we can't anyway tell a Spotify engineer what to do. It's like impossible. So we have to do something good that they want to use. It's like we don't have a choice. So what we do is the platform also offers like out-of-the-box metrics to your services. You get CI/CD for free, testing framework, testing coverage, all of that. So you don't have to own any of that lifecycle yourself. Okay, so how are we doing with the platform? Which, if you remember, this is one of our solutions to how to find the things, the second productivity blocker that our engineers brought up. So we have a 100% adoption of our platform, which is beautiful, because people are empowered not to use it. And I just took this 75% metric the other day, which is it also goes without saying because it's only 7 people owning the platform layer. Everything else written in the platform is done by customers in the organization and the discipline tribes. And really, the strategy that I would like you to remember is try to build something that people want to use and never mandate, because it's so nice in the beginning to sort of, oh, we are coming from security, you have to do this. We are coming from compliance, you have to do this. Or you have to migrate to this iOS, a new version of iOS, Linux iOS. But that quickly creates this really tragic culture. People lose creativity and will simply start to build stuff on their own. So you really need to not use that tool of forcing people to do something that you would like them to do. You really need to work harder, I think. That's what we realized that we needed to do. We need to work harder and actually provide something that people wanted to use, because we want engineers to still be able to choose whatever makes them the fastest, because they would know. All right. So I intentionally did this talk a little bit shorter than the time I was allotted, and that's because I would love to hear some reflections and thoughts from you, maybe some questions, and I can maybe provide some answers, who knows. So if you fell asleep, you don't look like you fell asleep. But if you did, these are the 3 things that I have been talking about. So T-shapedness, we believe, grows resilient people who are more productive and more empowered, more enabled. And we think it lessens meetings. In order to grow T-shaped people, we believe we need to provide them with accessible information so that they can go cross-skilling, cross-discipline. We need to lower that threshold. We did that by building this platform. When you build that platform, we believe that you should build it together with the customer of the organization, that means our engineers, and together with the people actually building most of the tools. And how to go about doing that is adopt the open source mentality and trust your engineers to only use the key is that they will use something that's better than what they could have produced themselves. So you got to dare to have very, very high standards and sort of let people choose themselves. So build an open platform which they can choose to use and plug into. All right. That's all I had. Thank you so much for listening.
You also need to spend time on this. So how much would you say in average do you allocate to that?
Great question. So the question is, how much time do we spend actually cross-skilling, spending time, because it takes time to learn a new skill, when you at the same time need to also deliver a lot of features? It's difficult to answer because there are so many different answers. We are basing all of this on extensive user research and spinning up a team right now that will look into this even more. So we believe that we will grow the percentage of time we spend in a week of cross-skilling. I would say, like our universities, for example, they take up 1 week, one full week for an engineer to do the mobile university, and different levels, of course, so 1 week each. And a typical engineer would do, I think, a university a year at least, hopefully. So that's one measurement. Then we also have much quicker and faster feedback loops than that. That would be lunch and learns. And we are encouraging having lunch and learns like that's a weekly thing. So our embeds usually, since we have embeds constantly, we usually have them do lunch and learn with all the teams they are going to and all the teams they are when they are getting back to their home team. That's another measurement. I don't have one percentage for you, but it's something I will look into. Yes? That's another great question. Thank you. So the question was, well, are you asking your engineers to cross-skill, or are you offering it? And what do you do if, because you have seen some engineers actually being sort of asked, told to do certain things, and then they quit after a few months because they are like not working with this thing they're passionate about and love. And exactly because of that, this needs to come from within, and we can never enforce anything here, because we hire a lot of like passionate people that we want to grow them. And if an engineer wants to grow in web, he or she should, and not become an iOS engineer at all. But usually there is a benefit. I think most engineers actually have stumbled upon some discipline that often is close to them. Me as a backender, I was like often close to web, and it would have really benefited me if I could have done some more React. So I think if one also finds, there's also another level of cross-skilling. So we're talking about sort of the most crude level of going to one discipline to the other. But we're also talking about internally at Spotify to have a more granular level of T-shapedness, which would be, maybe I need to learn another domain. Maybe I need to learn more about monitoring, observability, alerting, reliability, accessibility, whatever. Those are very important and complex domains, which is lovely, but maybe I don't know much about that because I'm in the user platform domain. For example, authentication is one other huge aspect. That would also be cross-skilling if I would learn a lot about authentication. So, but also it has to come from within. So it is an offer and it's not an ask. Yeah.
Talking about scale, I think that what most companies are afraid of when you actually can choose yourself as an engineer, you end up in a situation where everybody wants to do React, maybe. Or do you run into that kind of problem right now? Or I mean, that would be my fear, scaling up business. See that I have everybody in React, nobody wants to do it.
That's super. So yes, we have that problem. So because there are trends in engineering just like everything else. And the question was, do we see the problem of people wanting to grow in a certain skill set, but that might not be the skill set we are really in need of? For example, there is a huge interest in the industry right now for machine learning. And we also have machine learning universities and machine learning. Lots of needs in machine learning. It's also very hard to hire people because there are just not that many that have extensive experience. So huge internal interest. So those classes fill up like in seconds, literally. However, we also need to have people learning like iOS development. And that's those, like, so many people wants to do that too, but not as many, and the need is so much more because it's much more a mature market. It's like that's where we are. We need to have an iOS app that is knocking it out of the park. So what we're trying to do there is upgrading our stack, because we, instead of asking people to please go ahead and also learn some iOS, we are trying to make the iOS stack very attractive. So of course, this is a long-term job. It can't happen in 5 minutes. But yeah, this is something we always battle with.
How much do you then need to invest in the upgrading of the stack? Because I think a lot of people, I mean, all companies have their technical depth. You kind of want to advance the stack always, but how much do you allocate for that?
Yeah, we have a few numbers on that. Help me out, Matthias, if I'm wrong here, but 25%-ish we put into what we call KTLO, is keep the lights up, keep the lights on, and that means upgrading your stack, doing the security updates, etc., etc. So 25% of the time spent in a squad, usually, that depends, of course, should be spent. If you are not spending any time, we are often, as I'm talking as a platform person, so I would find you and then ask you if you are incurring a lot of technical debt. Yes. Excellent question. So, a few questions. So, how do I sell this need to cross-skill to my company? And also, how do we measure productivity? That's the million-dollar question, though. So, let's start with measuring productivity. Super hard. No one has ever managed to do it yet. It's the holy grail in this domain. So we are basing ourselves off of Facebook and other companies on how to measure productivity. Facebook, for example, they measure it by one of their main metrics is that how many merges does an engineer do per day in a certain repo. And we're measuring ourselves against that, so we are using that metric as well, so that you can totally do. However, we believe that that is a metric that isn't at all, it's not telling the truth, because we are doing a lot of pairing and mobbing, for example, plus productivity is so much more than just merging code. You know, it's maybe our staff engineers, they hardly never merge code anymore, sad to say, but they are super productive because they are enabling so many others. So how do you measure that? So the metrics, another metric that we use, which I mentioned in the talk, is that we measure onboarding time. So it's a proxy metric for productivity. So how fast can you become productive? So that measure is how many days does it take you at Spotify from day one to have merged your 10th PR. So we are in the PR, we're not in the master branch setup, but actually in a PR setup, a pull request setup, if you know what I mean. So we have adopted the open source at Spotify, so we're always using pull requests instead of having master branch. So that's another metric. But there are so many more things to do here, and we're looking into it. Let me see if I have another way of measuring actually T-shapedness. If you wanted to see, well, what's our status right now in the organization? What we do then is we are looking at throughout the 90 days, the last 90 days, and we're looking at all the commits. How many of them have you committed in one repo that we have categorized as, for example, backend? So if 60% of your commits are in that are in a backend repo, you have a major in backend. That's one way of determining it. And if 10% of your commits are in an Android repo, you have a minor in Android. Of course, this is also a metric that we need to refine. It's good as a start, and please use it if you find it useful. To just get this first sense quickly, where are we at in the org and what do we need to grow? But also it doesn't really tell the story of our senior engineers who might be the most T-shaped that we have. Because maybe they know a lot about Android, but they never ship any code in any Android repos. So we are completely not seeing a lot of T-shaped engineers also. Oh, and the other question was, how do I take this to my company? Well, I think it's through users' service, actually. Instead of trying to evangelize because you believe or have an assumption that this might be a good thing, ask what we did, because it didn't work for us. So what we did, we asked our engineers, and then we presented the data from our engineers to the rest of the organization. I think just having the data from the actual users, what's blocking them, helps. Oh, yes. Yes. How does a tribe measure how to allocate what they allocate time on? Well, it's not. I kind of exaggerated. It's not like we have a Big Brother thing going on that we actually would find that person or that poor squad. It's more like squads are so very passionate about being fast. So we have not seen a big need for this. To have these numbers, which we have presented from platform to the rest of the R&D organization, it's more, in the sense that's more enabling engineers that are already passionate about creating quality, so that they know they are allowed to spend and expected to spend approximately 25-ish% of time. So I don't think we really have that problem. We need to find someone not doing their, like, shipping quality. I think it's more the other way around, that sometimes people are just so focused on producing that feature to, for example, we just launched in India. So we had this phone number sign up in India, because in India, the Indian market, we realized, well, people don't have an email sometimes, but everyone has a phone, so they need a phone number sign up. And we were so focused on the phone number sign up, and the teams were then asking, well, if we're going to create this sign up flow, which is completely isolated to India, how do we create this but in a platformized way, so that we can use this in South America as well, because we are probably seeing the same trends there, or needs. So then these numbers are pretty good, because then they are like reassured from a platform perspective that yes, you should platformize your things, and you could bake it into the platform piece of the chunk of work that goes into a quarter, and not only sort of focus on the small task at hand that needs to be shipped this quarter. I hope that answered your question. Thanks. All right. Thanks for listening.